Okay, guys, good afternoon. My name is Vivian. So for the next 30 minutes or so, we're gonna now move on to some strategies that you could consider using in your EMI classroom just to help students, to engage students and help them learn in the EMI environment. Now, Joyce was asking you the question that, well, she asked you about the challenges we face in the EMI class. Actually, I am very curious about that question myself. So I went online the other day and then just watched a few videos, 10-ish videos, mostly about interviews between students and some EMI teachers. They talk about some of the, they give some comments on the EMI class they took. And then here are some emergent themes that I discovered. And you could see one of the very dominant theme here is the lack of confidence to speak up here for, especially from the student side. They would report that they actually found it very difficult to say something or to express their ideas. Now, interestingly, recently I came across a British Council study, and it focused primarily on elementary school students in the speaking activities. And these students hesitate to speak up in the activities. And although these conclusions were drawn from a younger demographic, I think it still offers us some very useful insights to our tertiary context. Now, so here are some of the factors, well, the needs that students require and that's identified in the study. So the first need being competence, meaning everybody should believe they could actually do something. So they would need to believe in this to be able to actually contribute. Okay, so that's the first need. And then they need to be able to make their own decisions in a way that I'm going to show some of the strategies that might help our students to kind of decide what to do, or at least to freely express what they wanted to say, if you like. And then also they should be able to think that I belong and I feel valued in the classroom. So all these needs together, if we take these factors into account, we should be able to design activities that really truly engage and involve our students in learning. If you're interested in the research, you feel free to scan the QR code. Now, another very useful or very, nice reminder for us all is to be able to establish an environment that address these needs. We really have to know our students. We have to know where they are, let's say, at this moment, or at when they enter our list, course, we should know how they're doing. So one thing is, one way to do this is to get to know them from the very common mistakes they make. And here is a QR code for another page. If you scan it, you should be able to see some of the very common mistakes students make over some of our best steps that we've collected in the past. Knowing this should help us, give us some background of our students, and we could go from there and design tasks that really suit them, or at least create an environment that would encourage them to engage in talks. All right, so what are we gonna do now is I'm gonna just present some of the strategies that we found useful or reported useful in the past. And first one being the graphic organizers, and we will see its applications in note-taking and also in vocabulary. So to be specific, how do we use it to practice vocabulary? Also, we're going to look at opinion gaps, and then I'm going to introduce a tool, an AI tool called TWI. Some of you might have heard. If you haven't, it's fine. We'll briefly mention that, and I'll show you some of the pages from the website, and maybe it could be helpful for some people. And finally, we're going to look at information gaps here. So information gap was its application in group work. So how do we use this to promote group work? And this could encourage students to speak and to contribute. And also a very important type of task called data synthesis. You might have seen some of it from Joy's presentation earlier, we're going to look at some of the actual teaching examples from the classroom. And for both of this type of gap activity, I would recommend an AI tool called Napkin AI. Also, I'm going to show some of the pages here for your reference in the future. Now, if you remember this slide from the end of Joy's slideshow for this, so hopefully all these strategies combined or all these strategies implemented in our course, hopefully are going to address the implications Joyce brought up earlier, and then we could try to use them to at least address a few of the items from here, and I will show you in detail how we could do this. Okay, so onto the strategies and the scaffolding. Now, key strategy 1 is the graphic organizers. So basically visualizing our thinking processes or the way we read, for example. So there are many types of graphic organizers. I'm just so on the screen, you'll be able to see, like, for example, if you're classifying, if you're summarizing, you could use like spider diagram, concept map. If you're sequencing, you are ordering ideas, etc. So all these, this is not an exhaustive list, as we know. But now the idea is we would encourage students as they engage in like disciplinary knowledge, they could use these organizers to kind of help them structure their thoughts and set a foundation for later tasks, if you like. So let's put them in an actual example. Now, graphic organizers are helpful in several ways to help. First is to help comprehension. So I'm going to show you for the part for keeping notes later, and then also for practicing vocabulary. Now, here is a topic from freshman biology focusing on human body structure. So often that's what we have, right? We would have a reading from a textbook, usually a very long one. I'm just having a shorter version here. And you can see here the topic is the structure of the human body. So of course, we could just give students a reading and send them home, read it individually. I could imagine maybe they would just, read it and then mark the words they don't know, maybe check them in the dictionary, put down some Mandarin translation, for example, and that's it. Or we could encourage them to, this is a shorter passage from what you just saw here. So encourage them to map out their ideas from the reading into a graphic organizer like the one you see here. Now, there are many types because visuals might differ in different disciplines, sometimes depending on the genre of the reading that you are dealing with. But then the key idea is to really involve some visuals as a way to organize your thoughts here. And it would be hopefully more fruitful than just reading from a piece of paper and taking random notes in that sense. Okay, we could also make it more challenging. So having notes like this would certainly help, but then we could also turn that group graphic organizer into a group reading activity. So that if they don't do work individually, we could put them in pairs or in 3s, in 4s in a group, and then put some gaps in the worksheets, have them talk through the activity. So they would have to discuss, for example, to find out the answer, and everybody would be responsible for some of the gaps, not all. If you could see how you would divide the work within an allotted period of time. But then, as you can see, this could not just be a linear type of activity. We could always make it involve members together to discuss and then work together on it. So that's one way for here. Now onto the next activity that we could do with a graphic organizer, which is practicing vocabulary. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, what happened usually is we do a reading, right? And then we because especially this is like a specialized type of reading, so we would end up with a very long list of jargons, the technical terms that we get from our reading, and it could look like this. And maybe we would just have some Mandarin written next to it, and that's all. And of course, at the end of the day, it would make you feel very dizzy, isn't it? So here we could actually use a graphic organizer to structure these words in a way like this. If you could have a look of this, almost like a mind map type of, shall we say, vocabulary network. At the very top in the bubble here, you'll be able to see the topic here, the human organism, and then coming down with lines connecting each bubble. So within the bubble, you put the key vocabulary or the key jargons the students have to learn. Of course, they do the work. Here, we're just suggesting this is one way to do it. So students would have to put the idea here, put it in the bubble, and then use the line to connect it. If you look at it closely, you will see the lines are actually, it has the disciplinary phrases there for students to build connection. So it is not just a random type of mind map where we just throw words on a piece of paper. Students actually have to build the relationship between among each word. And for this, they get to practice as a way to organize their ideas. Now, so I'll just make it slightly bigger for you for here. As you can see, this is what I meant here. With each line, everything has to, they have to show how each idea is connected with each other. And interestingly, when you assign tasks like this for students, sometimes they don't always end up with the same type of network because our brain functions differently. So everybody might have a slightly different version from each other, and that's perfectly natural, actually. And then it actually offers a great way as a good type of assessment for them to well, we could, for example, we could assign students to talk in pairs and compare and each other's vocabulary network, see what we've got, and the difference would prompt us to talk more about it. We would see, oh, that's where you have something different from mine, and why is that? And that why is that type of question would encourage students to share, and then to also go back and reflect on their own work, so where they after they look at other people's networks, they would have some questions for them for their own reflections as well. And that serves a very great activity for them to practice their knowledge in the special area. That's something we could consider using instead of just having a very long list of technical jargon. Okay, so what about for low achieving students? Maybe they need a little bit more help with verb phrases. So remember, I told you earlier the lines that have disciplinary phrases. We could offer this maybe a list or maybe like a word bank type of thing, a phrase bank type of thing for them to for their own reference. So the idea is really to offer scaffolding for students on the image, if you like, for student B, for them to be able to climb a ladder easily, if it's possible. So you can decide how long the list can be, or you can just choose some of very key phrases that you have to address in that specific lesson. But then just to give you an idea from here, if you can see. Okay, now how can these type of graphic organizer encourage students to use the specific language functions? They come to our class, use graphic organizers. Hopefully they learn to, or they get to practice sequencing. They get to prioritize their ideas. They get to classify. The list goes on, right? Depending on the type of task you are training them to do. But then here, the idea is really setting a foundation for them to understand and synthesize different types of information later. So it's going to add up layer by layer and lead them into synthesis of different pieces of information, hopefully in the future. So imagine you're not going to just stop with that one single reading. Every single reading, if we constantly doing practice like that, it's going to add up and then just going to be helpful for students. And also, for example, like it's good for explaining cause and effects, and it's good for comparing and contrasting. And all these are ways, serve as a good way for students to practice constructing or presenting their arguments effectively and confidently, if you like. All right, now moving on to the second key strategy, which is opinion gaps. Now let's change the topic a little bit. So from biology, let's now look at freshman philosophy. So for example, if we take this topic, realism and emotivism. Okay, now I do want to do an experiment with you. So let's simulate a lecture opening in the philosophy lesson, shall we? So pretend that you are now, I am a lecturer, and then you are now students, and then let's simulate the opening, okay? Right. Good morning. Today we're exploring a fundamental question in philosophy, the nature of right and wrong. Morality can be viewed in two main ways, either as universal with rules that apply to everyone, or as something shaped by individual feelings and cultural beliefs. Some argue that certain actions are always wrong regardless of the situation, while others suggest that moral truth depends on context. We'll examine moral realism, which asserts that objective moral truths exist, and emotivism, which views moral judgments as expressions of personal feelings. Now, let's look at these perspectives. Okay, how are we feeling? So are you still awake? I hope you're still awake. Okay, now it is, if you feel sleepy, it's probably quite natural, right? Raise your virtual hand if you're already thinking of your afternoon tea. I would do. Okay, now, instead of an opening like this, and this is probably quite true in many of the contexts, to be honest, and instead of this, we could consider using opinion gaps in our classroom. So the idea is to get students to discuss and express their viewpoints on a topic. Hence, here is a gap filled through shared perspectives. So instead of that, instead of what you've just experienced, we could ask students warm-up questions like this. They would pretty much do the same and actually get them to think about things actively. So ask students, what do you think about right and wrong? Or do you believe that there are rules that everyone should follow? Is there anything you think is always wrong? Etc., etc. List the fundamental questions that you think would probably prompt their thinking and help them kind of engage, or at least wake them up at the beginning of the session here. Okay, and then you could do it in the think, pair, share, report sequence. So get them to look at the question, think about it, and then they pair up with their neighbor possibly, and then share with each other. Later, when they report, they do this in the with the entire class, so everybody gets a chance to hear what others have been saying in that warm-up session. So that way, you started small, so students feel less threatened about putting themselves on the spot to share in front of everybody. You give them a little bit scaffold, start with small questions with someone they feel safe with, and then later expand it into something bigger, something they could manage step by step. That's the idea here. Now, here I'd like to offer some scaffolding ideas for you. So there is a tool called TWE that if you haven't heard about this, feel free to scan the QR code, and you might also be able to see a link in the chat box later. But then how do we use TWE for this? So we can use it to prepare opinions as inspirations. What do I mean by that is, I'll come back to this. What do I mean by that? Let's have a look here. So if you log on to TWE, and there is a function, there is a tool here called 4 opinions. And if you go into that, it's gonna, you can just give it some prompt, it's not even prompt actually, you just give it the topic that you were dealing on the day. So for example, like what we're doing, I give it a topic about, what's right, what's wrong, for example, and then it would generate opinions for you. So something like this. Now you can see at the top here, Mark says, I really believe that moral judgments are just opinions. Emily says, I'm all for moral realism, and then something. And John and Samantha, each of them having different opinions on this very topic. And then what you could do is put this onto pieces of paper, distribute the paper slip to every student. Each of the person will get something slightly different. They could look at the paper and then see if they disagree or don't they agree. Whichever way, they let us think about it. Remember, think, pair, share, report. They think about it and then they could share it with other people. Oh, what have you got? Oh, you got Emily's view. What do you think about it, for example? And they could start from there. That's one way that you could do, because often when we prepare questions and we throw them at students and they would just sit there and it feels like they don't want to talk, but sometimes that's because they don't know where they could start with. So maybe something as a starting point, something for them, maybe when they look at the information here, the opinion here, they decided they suddenly have their own idea and it's perfectly fine. Just something for them to work with, and we could go from there. Now, you might look at these opinions and feel like, oh, it's really long. I don't want to spend like a very long time for them to comprehend the messages. So at the bottom here, you can see 3 prompts, the left one being shortened. So you can actually shorten this opinions like this for here. So it could be very short, something that's brief, and then just go from there. Also, in the middle here, you can see simplify. If you think the messages are too long, we can not too long. If it's too difficult, we can simplify it. And then you can also upgrade it. Now, TWE has been kind of adjusted a little bit. So now they have college level language. If you think it's more suitable for tertiary level students, so welcome to give it a try. Now, actually use it, and maybe it could give you some inspirations for that. Okay, so as I said, from the 3rd bullet point here, so students work in pairs and each of them holding different piece of paper. Now, for stronger students, you don't have to prepare paper slips. So not everybody need the kind of scaffolding all the way through, or all the same in a same way. So you could decide how you want to use this, maybe for their the level of their engagement. Right. So that's TWE for your reference. Now, I'd also want to mention that this type of activity at the very beginning of the session, we as the teachers actually have a very nice opportunity to observe how our students are doing, especially when we are checking on their prior knowledge, how much they've already know, or do they want to talk about certain topics, or do they actually resonate with certain type of activities or the ideas that you've addressed in the classroom. And you should also be able to see which student is struggling in this time in this stage, and it's going to help us understand our students in a less formal way, so they don't feel like they are being observed in a very obvious way. So this would be a nice stage where we could decide how we're gonna maybe use this as a part of our data to adjust our sessions later, or adjust what we're gonna teach later for this activity. Okay, so how can opinion gap activities encourage students to use the specific language function? So we've seen what's happening in graphic organizers. For now, for gap activities like this, we could help students, encourage them to agree and disagree. You know, get a voice. Remember earlier when students are in the British Council study, where students have to be able to make their own decisions. You know, remember the second point there. They get to decide what they could share, or they get to have a voice and actually share it with people. So to be able to say, oh, I agree with something, I disagree, and also to be able to further kind of expand it into, they would have to clarify, or they would have to justify the opinions they've given, and also evaluate what each other has said, would be some of the very key functions, language functions that we try to practice here. And all these added up again would help to construct and present the argument in the future. If you're not doing that, we are actually setting foundation for this here. Now, moving on to the third key strategy, which is another type of gaps here. Earlier we looked at opinion gaps, now it's information gap. Notice how gap activity really opens up a space for students to contribute, or for students to at least know how each other is doing, or what each other has to say, has to comment about topics. So if you're not using this type of specific activity, still consider using, well, try to find the gap within your topic for students to be able to do something there. So let's have a look here. So an information gap activity involves students sharing missing details to complete a task. And then so this is done through communication or collaboration to fill the gap. So it's not just about language anymore, right? It's also about how you listen to other people. How do you work with each other? You know, but at first you try to be a nice listener, and later you also try to be, for example, taking turn talking with each other and collaborating through the activity. Now, let's see how this can be done in actual activities here. Okay, so the first type of activity is we can read through information gaps. So, for example, now let's look at the topic from earlier. If you still remember, our very first topic today is biology. Now, I'd really appreciate if you could switch off the microphone, please. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Now, so earlier we looked at this topic of human body structure, right? Now, this is a way to do it. So here we could have student A and B. Student A focusing on a type of worksheet that looks like this. So we have a control gap here, and then the other version might look like this. If you quickly kind of compare, you will see an idea here. So they will actually have to talk to each other to figure out the answer. Of course, student A reading something and student B reading something else to fill in their worksheets first, and later they're gonna collaborate to either chatting in groups or in pairs to fill the gaps and then find all the answers together to complete this thing. So the idea really is one person getting a piece of information, and then the other person with another piece of information, and at the end of the day, it's gonna all combined into a complete piece of information for them to take away with. So that's something we could all consider doing. So sometimes people might do it in variation, but then here are some worksheets maybe that you could use. Now, I do want to introduce this tool for you. It's called Napkin AI, and here's the QR code, and you could take a moment to scan that QR code. Also, you might see a link in the chat box later. it's a very handy type of tool. Actually, it's originally, I think people use it for presentations. They just want to visualize their presentation a little bit. So they have their information from their presentation and have it with the visuals. And then later teachers come and adopt it and then use it to generate graphic organizers that you could use in gap activities or simply for note-taking activities. Now, I do not have time now to just go through step by step, but the idea is I'll quickly mention. So if you have a list of reading that you get from, for example, your textbook, and you just have that list of reading, the actual reading, and put it on you will see like a notepad and put it there, and then it would generate some of the options for you to choose from. And it's actually a wide range of options available there. So worth trying, and it's free at the moment. So go and find something that suits what you're doing and suits the topic that we're doing. Okay. Now let's look at another type of information gap activity here. So if you can see from here, we now change another topic. Now let's look at freshman medicine. So here students would get a text accompanied by figures like the charts or figures or different visuals that you have. So the topic being medical chatbots, the benefits and challenges. Now, here is the actual reading. Now, you do not have to read the whole thing now. I will tell you briefly what this is about. So the first half of the article is it's talking about how patients feel about chatbot application in the medical field, and with a figure to give extra information on the patient side. And later, the second half of the reading is how doctors are feeling about chatbot use in their field, in the medical field again. And you could also see another type of figure here accompanied by that text. Now you probably would have guessed how this is going to work out. So we could do this. We could divide the students into two groups. Okay, and then so group A would focus on the patient's perspective, accompanied by figure 1, and then group B would focuses on doctors' perspectives. So with figure 2 here. So with figure 1, figure 2, two groups, you can get all the students, well, not all, but then students who are all doing patients reading sit together. They could chat about it, even use the graphic organizer to take notes or to organize their thoughts, map out what they are going to do later, and have B do the same thing. Then you could, here is some idea for the worksheets that you could design for students. So for group B, you can, here are some prompts that you could give. So tell them to identify key points about patients' attitudes. Okay, so for patients' attitudes, there is like a positive and a negative attitudes that can be found in the article, in the reading. And also ask them to identify the alignment or gaps between patient expectations and chatbot potential. And then off they go, they actually do this. Or for group B, the prompts could look like this. So ask them to focus on main ideas related to the doctor's opinions. So here's the doctor's views on chatbot. And then they're going to talk about the specific tasks doctors found valuable, and then also maybe some concerns or some of the areas that doctors have reported concerning, if they found any. And then that could be a version of what they can do from here. Now, I'd like to show you a more detailed type of prompts that you might have. I hope you'll be able to see. Okay, so this would be a briefer, let's say, a briefer version of the prompts that you give, or you could post them actual questions here. For example, like for group A, you could ask them, how do patients' attitude reflect the specific uses? So here you can see you give the actual question if you want to. But for this version, then you actually just give them the bullet points or some key points they could comment on. Either way is fine, but it really gives more space for students to reflect on what to do and how they could do it. Okay, so finally, after they read about it, and then they sorry about this. They read about it, and then it's time to put it together. Now, before they actually do this, as you can see the formative assessment here. So before they do this, of course, they talk to each other, right? So the group A has to find someone from group B to talk and share. And while they talk, the person who's listening has to take notes from what they are listening. So at the end of the day, they will end up with their own notes and a set of other notes from their group members. With that, you can assign a take-home assignment for them to do, a writing assignment for them to do. And here you could have them give them a topic, an essay topic here with this topic saying how to best utilize chatbots to help patients, and then tell them to summarize the main points of the text. Also tell them to state their own opinion on the topic. Now you can see because they don't read everything though, but then from their own set of notes and other the reports they get from other people, they should at least have some preliminary ideas for them to comment on this here. Now the final point here to make for you is they go home and write something, right? And usually what we do is when they come back with a piece of writing, we would think, okay, so let's just grade that writing. And I'd like to think I'd like to suggest for everybody to also take into account the process of what they've gone through. So from the very beginning where they started to read, to structure their thoughts into graphic organizer, for example, or from where they started to share with each other, they take notes. All that process is part of their learning too, and it's added up to the final product. So once we assign it to them, we could also look back, reflect on how they're doing from the previous sessions, and then maybe from there we could give them we could assess those factors as well, not just the final product. So everything added up, then we would be able to see their efforts. And remember, I would like to come back to the beginning of our the study that I show you. We try to make students feel they are valued. One very good way is to acknowledge their efforts. So everything they've tried or they've tried very hard to achieve is taken into consideration. So all these together, the process, the product combined would help us with a better grading in some sense here. Okay, so how does this information gap activity encourage students to use the language functions? Well, it gives them the task to describe data. They have to express opinions. They have to compare and contrast most of the time, and then synthesize the information, and then finally summarize. And this probably goes on again based on the nature of the task that we are doing. Okay, and then this would help them integrate information or motivate them to participate and integrate information from textual and the various modes of information here, be it visual inputs or other modes of information. Okay, I think we're pretty much there. Congratulations, you are officially a step closer to afternoon tea